A couple of episodes ago, I introduced you guys to the idea of the F off fund, or the whole idea around Vex money and emergency rations or contingency funds. Now, the F off fund is something that I saw on another business resource that I follow online, and they were talking about how every lady needs to have an F off funds, and they gave several reasons why. So, on the podcast recording where I introduced you guys to this concept, I just ran over a couple of things about whether having an FO fund, whether women having an FO fund is necessary, and some of the personal, cultural, and background context basically that that make us have to discuss these sorts of ideas, as a society and as individuals. So, even though I hope I made that clear at that recording, even though I'm not advocating a breakdown of families and societal structures, and I'm not pitching a tent one way or another, and believe me, I'm not pitching a tent because I happen to be the product of such dire circumstances. Because if you're a long-term listener, you remember that my mom had to raise 5 children on her own in Lagos because of what should I say, less than ideal family circumstances. Let's just put it that way. So I know that these are serious issues that we talk about, but anyway, where I came down on basically was just to say that assuming you are someone who is caught in that kind of situation, as some women are every now and then, whether in Nigeria or any other part of the globe, sales skills, sales training, the sorts of ideas that we discuss on this podcast are going to be absolutely necessary, going to be absolutely handy to chart a course for yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you're contemplating an FR fund, you are basically talking about skills acquisition. Sorry, not skills acquisition, funds acquisition. That's how do you raise capital for your business, or how do you get sales for that business idea that you already have running. And then you're also looking at personal development as well, which sales training and the discipline of personal selling can help with. So, why does a woman need an FO fund? At least according to that business resource that I was following. And one of the reasons that they put there was to leave abusive relationships. Some of the stats that they put there, or rather the rationale that they put there, was that abusive partners prey on the fact that some women, abusive partners prey on the fact that some women cannot afford to leave the relationship. Now, you'll be surprised to know that this is not just an African phenomenon, or rather, it's not just a Nigerian phenomenon per se, but I've come across some research, not related to this FF fund piece that I saw online, but I came across some research that showed how in America, there are lots of couples who stay together simply because they cannot afford to live separate lives. Because living separate lives, when both of you are together, you people are jointly responsible for the children's school fees, for rent, things like that. And so, the fact that neither of the partners are financially, empowered as their own, means that they just stay there in the relationship until the financial problems ease off. So you find this thing in Western societies where a couple remains together until the children are older and the children leave the house. You guys are no longer responsible for school fees and stuff like that. It is then that you find that people can divorce, and then somebody can leave the city and move to the suburbs, cheaper rent and blah blah and stuff like that. So it's not just a Nigerian phenomenon, but you have couples in different parts of the world, in different societies, contemplating these sorts of things, that you feel like you're in a relationship that is less than optimal, but neither of you can leave because you guys do not have the money. Now, not to be too cavalier or lighthearted about these things, it does bring to point one thing that I talk about on the podcast, which is that money gives options. Because you find that lots of people, when having conversations about money, especially this whole money can't buy happiness, and money can't buy love, and money can't do this, and money can't do that, when they have all those sorts of conversations, I like to point out that they're missing the point, that money is just a medium of exchange, And the chief benefit of having money is that it gives you options to do what it is that you want to do. Again, I'm not advocating that we should split up and break up our families. That is a separate discussion, which is probably not suited to what we talk about over here on the podcast. I already talk about those sorts of things on my other podcast, which is the So You're Getting Married podcast, which is targeted at people who are in a relationship and are getting ready to walk down the aisle. So if you search for my name, Tavishima Ayede, on that, on whatever podcast catcher that you're using, whatever podcast app, you'll be able to find that other podcast where you hear me talk about these sorts of ideas in a much more wholesome context, and not just picking out the financial aspect, if I can put it that way. So again, just search. Don't use the podcast name, but rather search for my name. It's TAVERSHIMA, and the surname AYEDE. Whenever you search, those options come up. But if you use the title, for some reason, I don't show up on other podcasting apps. I don't know why. Okay, so back to where we were. So money gives options. Basically, that's just it. Although ultimately the solution is not to be there in the first place, not to be in an abusive relationship in the first place. So that this whole conversation around having an FL fund is such a dire thing to contemplate. So solution, don't be there in the first place. And that's the reason why I talk about these sorts of things on my other podcast, so that if you're young, in love, starry-eyed, but it looks like, you've been dating Kunle for 3 years, and Kunle has this and this and these tendencies around money or around violence or around fidelity, these are the resources and these are the way to look about it, so that you can discern properly if marrying Kunle is such a good idea in the first place. Okay, so beyond that, if you're going to contemplate having an FL fund, like I've said, sales, absolutely important, because you're going to get all the tips that you need for personal growth, even if it's something as simple as the last episode where I spoke about, at the last episode, or maybe the last 2 episodes, where I spoke about ways for asking for the commitment. The fellow who just asked, where's the bar? Or if you use my own the formula that I've been throwing around on the podcast, which is the next step is we need an amount for X to secure your date or to secure the commitment, or blah blah blah, stuff like that. So even if all you're going to learn is stuff about how to ask for the commitment, to ask for the deal, to ask for the sale, it's going to be of tremendous value, because a lot of people lose the sale just because they make the presentation and then they keep quiet, or they make the presentation and then they just say, why don't you take some time to think about it? Because for some reason, some of us have been led to believe, growing up in the Nigerian professional space, that is what it is that you're supposed to do. That you make the presentation and you say, why don't you take some time to think about it, and then you leave, and then you try calling them some other time or visiting them some other time to now follow up and find out what the decision was. So you're going to get lots of tips about personal growth, and then of course on the matter of fund acquisition, getting capital to raise your capital for your business that you're trying to start, or trying to bring in more sales, product sales, revenue, basically, even if you have a service business. And so that those are the ways that knowledge about sales and personal selling can help. So again, I find it regrettable and deeply troubling that we do have to contemplate these sorts of things. Should our wives, our mothers, and our daughters, should they have secret accounts? Should they have FR funds? And how do they protect themselves in a world where the traditional support systems of spouse and family don't seem to work anymore? So on a personal note, yes, I do find these sorts of things troubling, but it's just the nature of the world, and that is where we are. On an individual note, and in our personal and religious corners, I guess we do whatever it is that we have to do, so that we don't have to have fallout from broken families all over the place. But until we get to that point, if you are going to protect yourself, and if you do need an FR fund, then you have to take sales and selling seriously, because you're not going to get that FR fund without it. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional, Tavishima Ayide. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.